How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So, my name is Michaela. I am the strategic outreach for partnerships for AFO. I am the one who reached out to these educators and really was pushing and trying to communicate and trying to get these interviews going.
Yeah. My name is Maeve McManaman, and my position is a director and project manager. So, Michaela and I sort of teamed up on this project to really flesh out these interviews. And I think that we did a really good job. So, we wanted to have this table talk to talk about what we learned. I mean, we sat through what, like 8 weeks of interviews, and
Yeah,
I think we got lots to say, right, Michaela?
definitely. It was very a lot of food for thought, as
Hmm.
we like mentioned a lot in a lot of videos, and really got our
Absolutely.
gears working. And there was just a lot to learn on our part.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just dive right into the question. So, can you talk about quickly what your initial impression of ethnic studies was before this interview series?
Yeah, so my initial impression of ethnic studies before this interview series was, taking an ethnic studies course before. Um, I before this interview series, I saw it as a way to not only learn about different cultures, but kind of learn about the things that aren't necessarily taught in regular classrooms. It's I found ethnic studies taking the course and just being around educators that are in ethnic studies, that they approach their classroom settings in a different way. There's a lot of community building, and so like my initial impression was really just kind of going in thinking of my experiences with ethnic studies like that.
Mhm. My initial impression of ethnic studies is actually, I think, super different from yours, which I didn't realize. I
Yeah.
think I stumbled upon ethnic studies accidentally when you and
Ooh.
Jesse decided to take the course at City College, and I just kind of like tagged myself onto the things that you guys are doing with your life. But before these interviews, I imagine that my opinion on ethnic studies and impression of it was kind of like any sort of normal persons that didn't have any exposure to it. I was like,
Mhm.
okay, so we're going to learn about other people's cultures.
Right.
But that was sort of beyond the scope of it. I didn't really have any insight into the way classrooms were set up or, overall messaging because
Hmm.
we were students in that scenario, so it was
Right.
hard to understand like the broader context of ethnic studies until we took this step back, or at least I took this step back to like listen to what educators had to say, because I could have only spoken about my experience in the class, which is very different in my opinion.
Right.
So I think that we both went through some very transformative things here, so let's continue to move on.
Hmm.
So right off that question, how did your opinion of ethnic studies change after conducting these interviews, Michaela?
So my opinion in viewing ethnic studies is I feel like I have a deeper understanding and kind of a zoomed out focus of what the course is,
Yeah.
and kind of like seeing it holistically of not only the values but like how it applies to other subject fields.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's just these interviews allowed me to understand ethnic studies um, as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit before spoiling any of the other answers to the questions that I might ask you today about like
Yeah.
what that whole is?
Yeah. So the whole, let's see, um, like what Miss Sarah said, that it's not what a cultural buffet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, it is it like that I think that really stuck with me, that it's ethnic studies is a course, and it's also a tool to confront systems of power. Like we're in that class, you are learning power dynamics and how institutions are and kind of our relationships. A lot of like I'm taking a sociology class, so that's kind of like a lot where we work in there. So I see sociology values in ethnic studies. So yeah, so that holistic view of ethnic studies, I was able to learn and to see how ethnic studies encompasses um, just sociological factors and the interplay between our relationships with ourselves and relationships with other people around us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think those are really good insights. I think they also that also really like relates to how I kind of felt about it after the
Mm-hmm.
interview. So the way that my opinion changed about ethnic studies after conducting these interviews, I think was definitely like this zoomed out focus, but not just on, institutions of oppression
Mm-hmm.
and um like coursework that students do, but it kind of opened my mind. Right now I'm a political science major, as Michaela, but now the audience knows. And one of the things that I read about all the time is systems, just systems in general. They don't have
Right.
to be systems of oppression. They can be just like systems, like a bureaucracy or a system or like community. Like, what is a system of a community? What are the factors? How does one get from point A to point B?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that through going through these interviews, I've learned a lot about the little steps that need to be taken in order to create, in this scenario, like an ethnic studies system within the K through 12 curriculum here in
Mm-hmm.
California. But also, I can see that mirrored in a lot of other types of systems that we have here in the United States, which is kind of interesting, right? When you think about how we're not really that different. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we have all these initiatives as, college students and what we're trying to do, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
what somebody else is trying to do. But the steps, I think,
Mm-hmm.
getting there are quite similar, or at least that's kind of where I kind of came out of it with.
Yeah. Do you want to like kind of give me an example of like what that step, that you see is similar in a different system?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think, like, for example, education is always first. I don't think really anyone can doubt that. But to not get too political, I think that personally, based on my studies and my own personal experience, education is probably one of the most political things you can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Forget politicians and bureaucrats. Really, I think education becomes this huge circle that people want to think about things politically with, because they're children. They're the our next generation, where they
Right.
take us, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so where I see the similarities is, like, for example, in my job, I do data analytics,
Mm-hmm.
and I first have to be taught how to do it, and then I have to practice how to do it, and then I
Right.
have to put it into practice, and then
Mm-hmm.
eventually I'll have to explain to somebody else what I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point on, those like four factors sort of formulate the way that I am as a data analyst, right?
Mm, yeah.
So I feel like that could be like moved over into
Mm-hmm.
ethnic studies, because not only are you trying to teach, you want them to practice, you want them to then be able to show someone else how to do it, and then that encapsulates how that person goes off into the world. And I think that you're right. We're definitely talking about it from a sociological standpoint. So it's going to have much broader effects on communities.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the same petri dish, they're not really that different.
Yeah. I find that's a really good example, Maeve. Like it really, and how you related it to yourself. Um, that and you also bring up another a good point of like, yes, like those are the steps that are needed to take to understand and really like apply it into your life.
Yeah. Because I think that one thing, especially, we're both college students, right? One of the things I see the most is rushing.
Mm,
And I think people personally rush to try to feel like they understand something. But I really think when you do something like that, you're just scratching the superficial layer of that something
right.
to get what you think you need out of it. But if you just sit and you actually allow yourself to be taught, like
Mm-hmm.
we allowed ourselves to be taught in these interviews, like we could have gone into those interviews with a much more closed mindset. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? We could have been like,
definitely.
oh, I know that ethnic studies is good, and I don't want to hear anything about
Right.
how it could be bad in any sort of type of way, because I know that it's good. So I think that to a certain extent, there's very much like this allowing yourself to be taught aspect that
Yeah.
I really learned about through the interviews, because there are definitely some pieces that we're going to get into later that I was like, huh, I probably wouldn't have agreed with that if somebody brought it up to me just like right off like a plain slate. And you know what I mean? But
Right.
actually listening to someone's story and their own
Mm-hmm.
experiences, you're much better able to make the connections.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We really did allow ourselves to sit and be open to different ideas. And I think that's really what I loved about the interviews, is just
Mm-hmm.
learning different different aspects of what we never would have thought before.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now we broke it all down for them. We showed them, okay, how did our opinion change? So, along with that question comes, what did you learn about yourself or the people around you, Michaela? Tell me all about it.
Yeah. So I made some like somewhat major shifts based in in my life, and kind of like the direction I'm going with my career based from these interviews. So I learned that I want to be in health education, that I want to get my undergraduate degree as a bachelor in science in health education, because um, there are, from our interview with Sarah Tanavasa, she really got my gears turning, and she got me, and she kind of exposed me um, to the idea of health education and what you're able to do with that. So, being in this organization, we're advocating, of course, our name is All for One Success and Advocacy. So we're doing this work, and for this project, we're advocating for ethnic studies. And I specifically want to be in the health field, and I was on the nursing track. And to be a nurse and get my undergraduates in nursing, I'm going to go straight into nursing. Like,
Mhm.
that's just period.
Right.
And I see getting this foundation with health education, and then maybe going into nursing later, maybe in a master's, that I'm able to get that foundation of like advocacy. Like, this is what I feel I'm able to do. Like, I feel really comfortable, and I feel like this is where I'm getting called to, is really working with programs and like looking at policies and stuff like that. And really, I want to be in the health field because I want to make an impact, and I want to, of course, change things.
Mhm.
And yeah, so through these interviews, I was able to see that there's there's a lot of aspects into where I can apply, not only in ethnic studies lens, but also kind of, I would say, get it to the fit to apply to who I am and what I stand for.
Mhm.
If that made sense. I hope I
Yeah, no,
explained that.
that made sense to me. To be fair, I talk about this with you on a very regular basis,
Yeah.
but that definitely made sense to me.
Okay, great.
Um, I have a quick question, and I don't think I've ever asked you this question before. Could you describe what the discomfort felt like for you? Like why you weren't pulled towards nursing and how, or what specific aspect of this advocacy initiative actually
Mm-hmm.
pulled you from that? We've been
Yeah.
friends now for what, almost 7 years, like 5 years now.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I had personal experience with you speaking to me about being unsure about, your career directive.
Mm-hmm.
And it just nothing seemed to pull you like these interviews pulled you. So could you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that discomfort and like what that felt like?
Yeah.
What brought you out of it?
Yeah, for the people watching, if you watch our second interview, I think it's very visible to how I'm sitting there and really kind of soaking it all in, and just hearing her talk about kind of her journey. And I felt like um, I was able to relate to her and her story, and kind of um, see myself in kind of her track, kind of because she's biracial also.
Mm,
So I felt like we relate on some type of level of that. But really hearing that, she sat in her able to take this wide scope of health, and learn about um, the impacts of health, these conditions on certain groups. That's um, where I feel, because I really wanted to be a nurse to confront the maternal death disparity. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's, and that just lead me to wanting being a nurse in obstetrics.
Right.
But that discomfort, you said, how does it feel to sit in it?
Yeah. Like, how did that feel for you?
It, it was like, it was, I feel like, if anything, with anything that is like uncomfortable, it was a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I've always, had the motivation to be a nurse and
Mm-hmm.
had the motivation to follow that track. So um, being opened up to something new was
Mm-hmm.
definitely a little scary, because like I've this uncharted territory. But in the end, really going out after like feeling that discomfort, like, oh, maybe this is a better, better track for me. Maybe this is, where I feel more drawn to. After like feeling that, I went out and started researching. I had another talk with advisors and everything, and doing my own research about what exactly health education has.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed me to really solidify, like, okay, you were uncomfortable, you learned something new, and what are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I chose to change my major because
That's a
that's,
powerful message, Michaela. Just
yeah.
throw that out there. Just
Thank you,
toss it
Maeve.
in there.
Yeah, that discomfort really, it pushed me. Anything like, it really pushed me to learn more, and to really apply what I have, the new information that I've gotten, apply it to a value to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's amazing, Michaela. I think that your story is going to be one that you continue to tell, by the way, because
Yeah.
I'm going to ask about it, and I'm sure other people will want to know more because you're an interesting person now with this different career. Um, you're good. So, for me, what did I learn about myself or the people around me? Huh. I think it is actually quite good that we both kind of come from different schools of thought around
Mm-hmm.
this. Like, feel like the lens that I look at ethnic studies in, at least in my coursework, is definitely through like a policy, history laced
Mm-hmm.
perspective. And one thing I definitely learned about myself was that I'm definitely not the most upstanding citizen. I should That's partially why I wanted to create this organization with you guys, was because I just felt like I wasn't doing enough. But
Mm-hmm.
after being in those interviews, I was like, damn, I'm really not doing enough. Like, I have this big old brain up in here and I'm not like trying to help other people. Like, what am I doing with myself? If I wasn't doing this, I'd be laying in bed right now.
Yeah.
That's not productive. There's really not that much time in life. I mean, if you think about it. Anyway, let's not get into that conversation. But more importantly, what I learned about the people around me, I honestly think that going through these interviews have made me a lot more empathetic. I think the reason why I brought up rush in the
Mm-hmm.
like rushing things is because I'm definitely the type of person to do that. I it's easier for me, like in my mind I compartmentalize a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and I compartmentalize people and their stories as well in my own head.
Right.
But forcing myself to sit through these interviews has really opened my mind to wanting to hear stories about other people and where they come from,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what they think on one thing. Because
Right.
it's the same thing, right? Like, you don't want ethnic studies to be judged on the basis of an ethnic buffet, or
Mm-hmm.
just, something that's unstructured, or the way that a lot of our interviewees spoke about some of the impediments to ethnic studies.
Right.
But in that same breath, I think almost oppositely, I've learned that, people are not just the one thing that they say or the one thing that they do. If you really take the time, and that's up to you if you want to take the time. I'm not saying go out and listen to everyone who has something to say to you. Like, that is a waste of your time. But if you get an opportunity, I think, to actually hear the stories of other people, it's really educational.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I actually started doing in my personal life, I think you know this, Michaela, but I take myself on dates on Fridays and I listen to podcasts. And I've been really into The Moth recently. And
What's
it's this
that?
storytelling podcast of people from all over the world. They have like different little setups, and people just tell stories about their lives in their countries and, you know, whatever. And they're
Wow.
just really interesting. This woman, she spoke about how her and her six sisters, instead of men, like six men carrying her father's coffin because he
Yeah.
died,
Right.
her and her six sisters to carried him to his grave,
Right.
like that long ass way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like this really empowering story of womanhood and what it meant to be a daughter
Right.
in a society that prioritized, you know, men's physical strength and
Yeah.
stoicism and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think that I've become a lot more empathetic and a little bit more patient, to be fair. You know, I've definitely slowed down. I see it in my personal life as well. I just like, I want to slow down because I don't know what I'm rushing,
Yeah.
you know? Um, all right. So next question. What stood out to you in these interviews? Maybe an overall message or, you know, it can be a specific point from also one of the interviewers.
Yeah. Um, what what stood out and kind of is like sticking with me is the ability to deconstruct, you know, um, these historical like negative stories
Mm-hmm.
and learn about them, while also installing hope and
Mm-hmm.
like what Hannah brought up in her interview. I think that
That
is,
was a good interview. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like that was one of the most more not more, but most powerful things that I felt, you know, that was mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important because, you know, I have found myself learning about um, these different things that have happened um, throughout our course of a country and just kind of our history. And it's really, you know, depressing and it gets me angry. And then like, you know, you sit in that anger and it's like, okay, what now, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I think it was just a really good point to you know, call attention to that. Ethnic studies not only does that, but also gives you the tools to um, make a positive impact from, you know, that negative experience and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. My takeaway is also quite similar to yours.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things, and it was in Hannah's interview and also in Jerome's interview, our very last one, was you know, disrupt hopelessness, disrupt discrimination, just disrupt.
Right.
And I think by disrupting that, you're creating a more humanizing place where you're humanizing another individual.
Yeah.
And that was definitely the most powerful image. I don't know. Maybe if you spoke to me 2 years ago, I would probably say, like, how could you stand there and talk about like slavery, but then like, but
Mm-hmm.
be hopeful, babies. You're gonna change the world. Because that was a lot of the dialogue I felt I
Yeah.
received in high school. And you could see the passion in all of our interviewees. Hannah, Morgan, Bruna, Jerome,
Nikhil.
Sarah, Nikhil. Like, you could really tell that, you know, they're 100% aware of what the United States history looks like
Oh
and the
yeah.
histories of what even sparked. You know, like
Right.
for Hannah, it was the Vietnam War. You know, there were people came from different areas of spark, right?
Right.
But you could really tell that they genuinely cared about this humanity portion of it. And
Mm-hmm.
to my knowledge, I think that we might be the only people talking about that
Mm. The
because
humanizing aspect.
yeah,
Mm.
because I think that, you know, people are really focused on what a curriculum looks like. Like when we talked to Bruna about, we asked her to share what one of her lesson plans looked like.
Right.
And for her, I think it was her first unit, and she talked about, you know, holding space for Socratic seminars and just being really responsible for the conversations that went on there. Like, I think those are the questions that the majority of people invested in education want to be hearing, because we're trying to pass AB 331. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that for our audience, which are students or people just, floating around YouTube, I think that us having, humanity be a very large piece of why we're all sitting here today
Right.
is probably the most important, because it's the most truest.
Yeah.
Is it not?
I Yeah, among a lot of other points, but
Yeah,
I
along a
think
lot of other points.
but yeah, I think it's definitely one of the most important and the most in your face about not only this course but like in life.
Mhm.
You want to continue to humanize people and recognize that they are human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that we could speak way more about that, but let's try to get through these questions.
Got it, got it, got it.
Okay, so key takeaway of these interviews. So the key takeaway for me from these interviews is to be a more empathetic person and listen to the stories of other people. That
Mm.
is my key takeaway.
Okay. My key takeaway is to allow yourself to sit in discomfort and allow
Damn.
yourself to be open um, to different information and then integrate that information, do as you please with it, but allow yourself
Yes,
to be open to it.
absolutely. You take away from things what you want to take away from it. No
Yeah.
matter if you're like pulling mushrooms or taking a college course, you definitely take away what you want to take away from it.
Right.
So that was beautiful. What is the key takeaway you want the audience to feel from these interviews? That one's a harder one.
Hmm.
For me, the key takeaway for the audience and what I hope for the audience is that they continue to engage. And that I think that there's a line of difference between doing what Michaela and I do and then also just not being interested in it, but wanting to educate yourself more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the audience, I hope that you take away that you should continue to engage with videos like this, continue to engage with our platform and platforms alike that are trying to educate and trying to give you something, you know, that they've worked really hard on. I think
Mm-hmm.
it feels really different coming from an intimate group of two people versus
Right.
like a giant corporation. Because you
Right.
can take what you want from it. These are just
Yeah.
interviews.
Very true. I think a key takeaway for the audience would to be not only if you're able to take an ethnic studies course, um, take it, but also be open. And like you said, I think really for me, I would want the audience to continue to engage and continue to just be um, open and allowing for um, different allow that person who doesn't necessarily agree with you to explain why.
Mm-hmm.
And like they say, read opposing opinions and read ones that you agree with, and even the opposing ones you know give you more um give you more uh yeah, give you more perspective and give you more of a um stronger argument for yourself.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree. And just to sort of add on to that, one of the things that I've noticed in our interviews and in my own personal reading, along with the schoolwork that I do, right now I'm reading the Communist Manifesto. So I'm definitely like reading the opposite side right now as someone who considers herself to be a Democrat. Um, and just, I don't know, democracy forever, yay. Um, I think that when we boil it down, we think about what motivates ourselves to go out and do things or the changes that we want to see in our communities. I believe that that happens on both ends, and there's always something that you can look for to find similarities in.
Yeah.
Like if you want toast and he wants a pita bread, it's still bread.
Hmm.
Like let's work it out. I don't know. I just really think that people spend far too much time fighting and less time
Mm,
listening. And I don't know, this was just a really great exercise in listening, Michaela. I really have
yeah,
to say.
it was really eye opening and really just allowing ourselves to be taught. and
Mm-hmm.
and I really appreciate the opportunity to have that experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Who would you suggest these videos to?
I would
Aside from
suggest
the entirety of your Instagram
in my Facebook, yeah.
and Facebook.
I would suggest these videos to young students that kind of don't know where to start on this topic, and kind of maybe that have heard the opposing sides of what ethnic studies is, and maybe they're like, thinking about what their schedule is going to be looking like for the next year or next semester or whatever, and they want to learn more. I would suggest those videos to also adults, to people who haven't had that opportunity to be in a school that offers a class like this, and that never really, heard the term ethnic studies back when they were in school.
Yeah, that was also a surprising piece of information during some of our interviews, that ethnic studies is like not used in some
Mm-hmm.
parts of the United States. Like the term ethnic studies.
Yeah.
Um, I 100,000% agree with everything you said about who should you suggest these videos to.
Mm-hmm.
Just to tack on a few more adjectives about who I would suggest these videos to. Personally, I think that again, I always want to preface it in personally, because I know that I learned very different than Michaela learns, and
Right.
Jonathan and Jesse and Sarah, they all learn very differently. But if I were somebody trying to learn more, or just not satisfied with what you have right now, like, I think definitely the reason why I was so gung-ho about these interviews in the beginning was because I didn't feel like I had enough information to create a firm position. Like, there was just not enough, like, not enough.
Yeah.
I think in the same breath, like, if you want to start learning about ethnic studies, you should definitely watch these videos. And then also, if you're not satisfied with what you've learned in your own like personal experience where you've grown up, or your internalized experience on planet Earth, watch these videos. You might learn something about yourself. Personally, it's it's worth your time. I think it is. There are really, really good
Yeah.
points in all of the interviews that we've had.
Yep.
How will you continue to practice ethnic studies values after this video series ends?
I would continue practicing ethnic studies values after this video series by approaching everybody as a human and approaching everybody as having value to their stories, and that they have different experiences that I have that have made them who they are. So humanizing, and just, again, being open to other people's ideas and experiences.
Mm-hmm. We have very similar trends. Just pretty much everything that Michaela said, I am taking away from this video series. I will continue to practice ethnic studies values after this video series ends by continuing to talk about this video series. Um, I think that, I talk to my siblings about this video series. I talk to my other parts of family about this video series, because it doesn't just represent the stories of the interviewers. And that's very obvious by their dialogue. Yes, they're well qualified. Yes, they're passionate, but they're also teachers too.
Hmm.
And that affects a much broader audience than we could ever reach with our YouTube channel. And it can also affect much deeper, right?
Right.
So my responsibility to this video series lies in continuing to talk about it and suggesting it to people who want to understand what it's like to be an educator, and not just in the teacher setting, but also in like your own personal life, right? Like, now Michaela can go out and talk to somebody about these interviews and educate on, humanity and disrupting hope, hopelessness, disrupting hopelessness. Um, so I think that is my responsibility to these videos. Yeah.
Yeah. I would also like to add on um, to kind of what I would want the audience to take over, and kind of suggesting these videos, is a point that Nikhil made in his video,
Mm.
in his interview, about getting other youth to continue to speak on their um, their experience in ethnic studies and pushing for, we want more of this. We want this for other students, and we want this representation for everybody else. So
Mhm.
I would love to, inspire other students who to speak up and to, when you can, and put yourself in positions where you can advocate.
Mhm. Absolutely. Oh, thank you, Michaela.
No problem.
Thank you for watching these videos.
Thank you.